I spent the morning going back through exactly what happened in that Lebanese village 2 days ago. 2 Israeli reservists walked into a booby-trapped building, and the whole thing blew up. But it's what happened after that, the part Washington is barely talking about. That's where the real story lives. And look, before we get into it, drop the country you're watching from in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where everyone's tuning in from today. I always read them. Let me start with a number for you. 2. That's the number of Israeli reservists killed in that building. But if you think this is just about 2 soldiers in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're missing the entire picture. The real number is bigger. It's closer to 4,300. That's how many people Lebanon says have died since this thing reignited back in March. And now we're looking at a situation where the fuse is burning again. Let me take you back to that village, Majd al-Zoun, southern Lebanon. 2 reservists entered a building, and an IED went off. Killed both of them right there. 4 others badly wounded. And for a moment, it looked like the entire region was about to go up in flames. But here's the thing I can't stop turning over in my head. Israel struck back. Of course they did. They launched airstrikes, hit multiple targets. They even issued evacuation warnings to civilians in other towns. But then something happened that reporters aren't really explaining properly. The United States stepped in, and they blocked a wider attack. Think about that. The U.S. didn't just say, "Be careful." They actively blocked a planned wider Israeli assault on Hezbollah. According to a Lebanese outlet, the Americans stepped in specifically to stop this from derailing ceasefire negotiations happening in Rome right now. So let me ask you something. What do you think happens when you tell a country like Israel, no? When their soldiers have just been killed and you're the one telling them to stand down? It's not simple. And that's the part nobody's talking about. Here's what I mean. We're in a weird moment. There's a ceasefire in place. It's incredibly fragile, but it exists. These Rome talks are the 7th round of negotiations since this whole thing kicked off. 7th round. And the U.S. is basically acting as the babysitter. But what kind of babysitter has to physically grab the kid's arm to stop them from punching back? Because that's basically what happened. From what I can piece together, the U.S. saw what was about to happen. They saw the Israeli response building into something much larger. And they said, and this is me interpreting here, no, don't do it. The talks are too important. Now, here's the part that makes me pause. The Israeli delegation actually ended those Rome talks 3 hours early that day. 3 hours. They walked out. They blamed misleading leaks from the Lebanese side. But come on, you and I both know that was cover. They were angry. They walked because they wanted to retaliate. And someone in Washington told them they couldn't, not in the way they wanted. The phrase I keep hearing is containment. The U.S. wants to contain this, keep it from spiraling. But here's my question to you. How do you contain a country that's just lost 2 soldiers in a booby-trapped building? You can't. You can only slow it down. And let me be blunt. This isn't some isolated incident that just happened in a vacuum. This has been building for months. Months. I need you to understand the context here. This conflict started in March as a spillover from the wider U.S.-Iran confrontation. Remember that? Iran was demanding Israel end the assaults in Lebanon as a condition for any broader peace deal. The U.S. kept saying these were separate issues, separate tracks. And guess what? That didn't work. We've been watching ceasefire talks for weeks. They agreed to a framework back in June. Pilot zones, troop withdrawals, Hezbollah disarmament. It was all very structured on paper. But on the ground, people are dying. Over 4,000 dead since March. And at the same time, Iran put its indirect talks with the U.S. on hold. The Strait of Hormuz closed down for a while. This whole thing is a tinderbox, and everyone's just walking around with matches in their pockets. Now I want to go back to something I said earlier. The U.S. blocked the wider attack. And I think that's the most important detail in this whole report. Because here's the unspoken part. The U.S. isn't just managing a conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. They're managing something much bigger. They're managing Iran. And they're managing the optics of being seen as a mediator while simultaneously supporting one side. This is where it gets tricky. The U.S. has troops in the region. They have ships. They have interests. And they're trying to negotiate a peace agreement while their closest ally in the region is being attacked. It's a balancing act that no one can really sustain. But here's what I think people miss. Israel isn't just some client state that does what it's told. It has its own objectives, its own internal politics, its own sense of existential threat. And when you tell a country like that to stand down, you're not just asking them to be patient. You're asking them to trust you, to believe that your diplomacy will protect them, to believe that the Rome talks matter more than their dead soldiers. That's a lot to ask. And honestly, I'm not sure it's fair. Let me walk you through what actually happened after the explosion, because this is where the timeline gets interesting. Wednesday, the explosion happens. 2 reservists are dead. 4 others are severely wounded. The Israeli military immediately starts bombing. They hit multiple targets in southern Lebanon. The Lebanese state media reports at least 1 person killed in a separate strike and 11 wounded. But then the U.S. intervenes. The reported wider attack is halted. And then, Thursday, the talks in Rome are expected to resume. Third and final day. So they walked out early, but they're going back because the U.S. said they have to. Now ask yourself this. What changed between Wednesday and Thursday? Did Israel suddenly become less angry? Did the dead soldiers suddenly matter less? No. Nothing changed except the pressure from Washington. And that's the real story here, the one nobody's saying out loud. The U.S. is actively restraining Israel, not because they want to, but because they have to. Because if this escalates, the Iran talks collapse. And if the Iran talks collapse, we're looking at a much wider war, a regional war, a war that could drag in everyone. Let me give you some numbers to think about. Since March, Israeli strikes have killed over 4,300 people in Lebanon, over 10,000 wounded, more than 800,000 people displaced. And even with a ceasefire, more than 360,000 people remain displaced. That's a city of people, sitting in shelters, waiting, wondering if their homes are still standing. And now we're talking about a wider attack, a bigger strike. What does that even mean? What does wider look like? I don't think anyone really knows, but I can tell you what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like stability. It doesn't look like peace. It looks like more of the same. Just more. And here's the part that really gets to me. The U.S. blocked it this time. But what about next time? Because there will be a next time. That's the scary part. There's always a next time. Another explosion, another raid, another escalation. And each time the restraint gets harder. Israel has made it clear. Their response to Hezbollah violations will be force. Hezbollah has made it clear. They won't disarm. Their leader said it publicly. They oppose the whole Rome framework. So who's holding this thing together? The U.S. is, alone. And they're holding it together with what? A promise? A threat? I don't think it's enough. Look, I'm not trying to be alarmist. I really am not. But I've been watching this thing unfold for months, and the pattern is always the same. Calm. Then an incident. Then revenge. Then a wider response. Then international mediators step in. Then a pause. Then the next incident. We're in the international mediators step in phase right now. And the U.S. is asking Israel to trust them, to hold back, to believe that diplomacy can work. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Diplomacy hasn't worked. Not really. The framework agreement from June, parts of it are being implemented. Pilot zones are being set up. But the fundamental issue, the disarmament of Hezbollah, that hasn't happened. And it's not going to happen because of a few meetings in Rome. So what happens when the pilot zones don't work? What happens when Hezbollah refuses to lay down its weapons and Israel says, "We told you so"? What happens when the U.S. says, "Be patient," and Israel says, "We're out of patience"? That's the moment I'm worried about. Now, I want to broaden this out for a second, because this isn't just about Israel and Lebanon. This is about America and what America's role is in the world right now. Think about what the U.S. just did. They inserted themselves between Israel and a retaliatory strike. They told a sovereign nation, effectively, no, we won't let you. That's a huge moment, and it's getting almost no attention. Why is that? Why is no one asking what right the U.S. has to do that? Or more importantly, what happens if the U.S. stops doing it? Because that's the real question, isn't it? Not what did the U.S. do, but what happens when the U.S. doesn't do it? And look, I know some of you watching are thinking, why should we even care? It's thousands of miles away. It's not our fight. And I get that. I really do. But here's the thing. This is our fight. Indirectly, maybe, but it is. Because when the Middle East blows up, oil prices spike, markets tumble, global trade gets disrupted, and refugees start moving. And that all comes back to America. Not to mention the troops, the ships, the aid. American taxpayer dollars are funding this. American lives are potentially at risk if this escalates. So yes, it matters. It all matters. And the U.S. is in a really hard spot. They're trying to be the mediator, but they're also one of the parties. They're trying to be the referee while also playing on the field. And that's not sustainable. So here's where I land on all of this. And I'm going to be direct with you. The U.S. blocking that wider attack, that's a sign of strength. It means there's still someone in charge, someone who can say enough. But it's also a sign of weakness. It means the U.S. has to actually say it, has to physically intervene. That's not normal. That's not a stable international order. And what happens when the U.S. says enough and Israel doesn't listen? What happens when the restraint mechanism breaks? That's the question that's keeping me up at night. Because you can't be the world's policeman forever. You just can't. It's expensive. It's exhausting. And eventually, someone calls your bluff. Is this the bluff being called? I don't know. But it feels too close for comfort. Let me walk through what happens next. If the Rome talks succeed, they'll expand the pilot zones. More areas will be handed over to the Lebanese army. Hezbollah will be expected to disarm. If the talks fail, the ceasefire collapses, and then we're back to all-out conflict. And the U.S. is in the middle, holding both sides, trying to keep it from breaking. I don't envy them. I really don't. It's an impossible job. And I'm not sure anyone could do it better. But I'm also not sure anyone could do it at all. Because here's the bottom line. This isn't about a building in a village in southern Lebanon. It's not about two reservists who walked into a trap. It's not even about Hezbollah or Israel or the United States. This is about whether a world order based on American power can hold, or whether we're sliding back into the old ways. Brutal, unpredictable, dangerous. And when I look at what happened yesterday, the U.S. having to stop an ally from retaliating, I think we're sliding. I think we're sliding faster than anyone wants to admit. And that's the part that scares me. Because if the United States can't guarantee safety, what can it guarantee? If it can't protect its allies or restrain them, what's the point of the alliance? These are tough questions, and I don't have easy answers. But I think they're the right questions. So let me ask you one more time. You've heard me walk through this, the building, the explosion, the response, the U.S. stepping in, the Rome talks, the fragile ceasefire, the impossible diplomacy. Now you tell me, what happens when the U.S. isn't there to block it? Because one day it won't be. One day there'll be a different administration, different priorities, or maybe just a different crisis that pulls the focus elsewhere. And on that day, Israel won't hold back. Hezbollah won't hold back. And nobody will be there to stop them. That's the nightmare scenario. And we're not as far from it as I'd like to think. 2 reservists died in that building. 2 families are mourning tonight. 4 others are in hospitals. And we came within a single decision of that number exploding, of dozens, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands. The U.S. made the right call. I think that's clear. They stopped something that could have been disastrous. But it's getting harder. It's going to get harder. And eventually, we might not be able to stop it at all. That's the truth. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not trying to make you angry. I'm just telling you what I see from where I'm sitting. A world where a single explosion nearly tears everything apart. A world where the only thing stopping it is a phone call from Washington. That's not a stable world. That's a fragile one. So here's my final thought, and I want you to really sit with this. The ceasefire is holding, for now. The Rome talks are continuing, for now. The U.S. is managing, for now. But for now is not the same as forever. It's never the same. It's just a pause. And the thing about pauses is they always end. They always do. The only question is how. Do we get a real peace, or do we get another explosion, another escalation, another moment where the world holds its breath and wonders if this time we won't be able to stop it? I don't know the answer. I really don't. But I know this. It's not over. It's never over. Not in that part of the world. Not with this conflict. And as long as the U.S. has to physically step in to block a wider attack, we're all just waiting for the next one. And that's the part that should worry everyone. This isn't done. But for now, I'll leave it here. I'll be keeping an eye on Rome, on the ceasefire, on what happens next. And I hope you will too. We'll talk about this again, I'm sure of it, because there's a lot more to say. For now, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay aware, and don't stop asking the hard questions, because someone has to.